Welcome to Sparking Everyday Discipleship, where we disciple parents to disciple their children with everyday discipleship every day, sparking important conversations with our children. I'm your host, Terrie Hellard-Brown, and we're so glad you've chosen to spend some time with us today. Today, our guest is Jill Baughan, and she is an author, speaker, podcaster, and curator of Joy Shots, who helps people find joy no matter what else is happening in life. Jill is no stranger to painful experiences, such as the sudden death of her father when she was 10, a long battle with infertility as an adult, and you'll find her first book deals with this, A Hope Deferred, A Couple's Guide to Coping with Infertility, which chronicled her journey. And she has a brand new book coming out April 1st called No Matter What, and it's a devotional book about finding joy even in the midst of sorrow. I know this conversation is going to bless you. I know Jill is going to encourage you. So let's join the conversation. Well, thank you for joining us today. We have a special guest with us. My dear friend, Jill Baughan, is with us today. Jill, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Hi, Terrie. I am looking forward to it very much.
Well, I love your podcast. And so I'm going to start with that. Tell us just real quickly about your wonderful podcast.
My podcast is a solo effort, so I don't typically interview people. Between 10 and 15 minutes, I just talk about some way. Every episode is one way to find joy no matter what else is going on in your life. There is humor. There are stories. So
great stories. I love the stories. It reminds me of the old radio show, The Rest of the Story, that one, because you get to hear these. Yeah, Paul Harvey, that's it. You get to hear these fun stories.
Right. Well, somebody asked me one time, how do you get all those ideas time after time? And I said, 99 times out of 100, it starts with a story. So there you go.
There you go. Well, tell us what your definition of joy is.
Well, I define joy. I made up my own because I could. And I define joy as deep delight that feeds your soul.
Ooh, I like that.
Because that kind of joy, it's imaginable to experience deep delight that feeds your soul, even when you're going through a really hard time.
Yeah.
It is not a jump up and down kind of joy. Lots of people have talked about, the difference between joy and happiness, but I love this because you can be intentional about finding that joy, no matter what else is going on, if you look for it.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a decision to focus on the joy, even in the midst of trials or whatever we're going through. Would you say?
Oh, absolutely. That you can find, and I have specific ways to do that, but you can find something that gives you deep delight and go access it. And your soul can be fed even if your heart is broken.
Yeah, that's true. So you mentioned if you've got ways to do that, what are some of the concrete ways that we can find joy no matter what's going on?
One of my favorites is practicing being intentional. And that sounds very vague, but I have a concrete way, one concrete way. I have lots of them, but we don't have all day to do that. But one of my favorites is to ask God in the beginning of the day, please help me pay attention to moments and concentrate on moments. Sometimes when you are having a rough time, that's all you have are moments. It may be a terrible, terrible day, but there are moments in there. To practice that, one thing my husband and I do that we have found fun and healing and joy producing is we keep a 1 line a day journal. I don't know if you've ever heard of that or not. Lots of people haven't. You can buy them anywhere. You can go online and just put in 1 line a day journal, but it's a little tiny journal and you can put one sentence. It's only got room for a little tiny bit. One sentence, one word, anything, 15 seconds a day. And then it goes through 365 days. And then there's another section of those and another one. It goes on for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So my husband and I decided that we would start one, and it was January of 2020. Which was really a good idea. But I say now, you say 2020 and everybody groans, but we really needed it that year. And 15 seconds, I know also a lot of people will say, well, I tried to keep a journal once and I just can't, I don't have time. I just don't keep up with it. And they get discouraged. But this is 15 seconds. So what we did was, and do every night before we go to bed, 15 seconds. That's it. We write down one good thing.
That's amazing.
Just one. No pressure, just one. But it is the sweetest way to go to sleep at night with that on your mind rather than the news or so many things that come at us. I know sometimes it's really, really hard. 2020 was a terrible year for us. I can tell you about a little bit of that later. But one time I was just sick. It was not life-threatening sick, but it was horrible, awful sick on a road trip. We were 15 hours in a car
Oh,
home, and I was sick, sick, sick all the way. My poor husband. We got home, and that night I thought, I got to put something down here, something good that happened today. And I wrote, didn't die. That was all I had. That was it. That was it. But it teaches you to pay attention. So pay attention to those moments and then take those moments. And if you can make something concrete out of it, all the better. I remember one time we went on a raft trip and we had a great time, put our nasty, icky shoes by the door. And every time I kept them there for 2 weeks because every time I went, I would unlock the door and look to the left, and there were those ratty shoes. And they gave me a little shot of joy. So, yeah, they stayed there for a while. But if you have coffee with a friend, you can take the cup and put it on your windowsill. One time, my husband and I went on a little vacation with another couple. It was this beautiful place with a beautiful pool. It was time to go. We had to catch a bus, but we were, a little bit early. We were walking by the pool, and I looked at it and I said to my friend, you know, we've got 15 good minutes before we have to get on that bus. What do you say we run back to the room, put our bathing suits on, get in there for 5 minutes and run, back and dry off? Of course, our husbands went ballistic at the idea, but we did it. And we ran, we swam, we came back. We didn't miss the bus. But for Christmas that year, I found a little glittery flip flop, and I took a little tiny picture of that pool and glued it to the bottom of that flip flop so that every Christmas she hangs that on her tree and thinks about that 5 minutes in the pool. So
that's amazing.
paying attention and making it concrete, two great things.
I love this because most of our podcast episodes are talking to parents who are trying to encourage their children, who are trying to encourage themselves in the hard times of parenting. And these ideas are just perfect for them. I mean, even as parents of toddlers or babies, we can take that 15 seconds at night
Right.
to write down a good thing from the day. And for sometimes I think with little guys, it's going to be hard to just stick with one because if you start
It's
thinking
true.
of those moments throughout the day, but
All the better though, you
yeah.
don't have to stick with one. So you can put more. And another thing that just popped into my mind is, and this would be good for parents of little ones too. I know my daughter has young children and she's tired all the time. She's
Yes.
tired all the time. There is no time for anything else, it seems like. And it's always about someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't get fed. I have found if you make an ongoing list, don't try to do it all at once. Make an ongoing list of things that just bring you joy, things that feed your soul, even tiny, tiny things. And then when you come upon a hard day or a hard time or a hard season, make sure you cross-reference those things that bring you joy with this hard time. So you draw from that list and give yourself a walk outside, a little tiny bit of time alone. That's hard. I know that is hard. But there are other things. I read a woman one time who went through a terrible time. Her best friend died. They were very outdoorsy people, just got such soul food from being outdoors. And she said, I had to go into the woods because no other arms were big enough.
Mm,
I think we just don't feed ourselves, even if it's a teaspoon, just a little bit. And all it takes is a little bit of intention,
yeah, that's true.
a list. That's it.
Well, and one of my favorite verses to remember is the joy of the Lord is our strength. And when we've gone through tough times, that's what I hold on to. And how would you explain that to someone? How does the joy of the Lord strengthen us? How does finding joy each day help us stay strong?
I think the word is hope,
Mm,
maybe. Hope for joy makes me feel joyful. Hope that you know that God is in control, God has you, your life isn't hopeless, that joy in the morning, it
mm,
will come. It will come, that night won't last forever when you have a relationship with Him. So, hope is
yeah.
the thing, I believe.
Well, I want to talk about your book that's coming out April 1st, right?
Yes, and it's not a joke.
I love that.
Thinking I'm going to get a really hard time from a lot of people about, but I love it. It's April Fool's Day. What could be better?
Well, I love how you've designed the book for the different seasons of life, the different places we are. Tell us about this book. It's a devotional book.
I wrote the devotional that I always wanted to read,
Mm,
but couldn't find, that included humor. Rare is the devotional that includes humor. I wanted it to be full of stories. And even though these are my stories from different stages of life, they're really everybody's stories, you'll see. Sometimes they're hard stories. I just wanted to write a book that would be a great thing for someone to keep on their nightstand so that right before your head hits the pillow, the goodness is in your mind and your heart. Or first thing when you wake up in the morning, same thing, rather than look at your phone. And these devotions don't take long. For busy
yeah.
parents, this is a good thing. They don't take long, just a couple minutes to read. So, first thing in the morning might be beneficial, or just at some random time during the day when you need a little shot of encouragement. It was so much fun to write this book. Just, I wanted it to have momentum also going through those stages of life and ending up at I think we called it the best of life,
Hmm.
not old. We didn't call it old. We're not calling it old age. Oh, goodness. That was the joy in writing that book. Just so much fun. I did an audio version of it also.
Oh, cool.
And this is just an aside. The audio engineer, it took us a long time to record this book because I would read a story. We would stop and he would say, that reminds me of, when I was, and I thought, well, there you go. It's everybody's story. So that was just confirmation on that.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I know. I hope people experience joy while they are reading its devotion and going back to hope for joy after you put it down.
Yeah. I haven't read the whole book, but I've read several of the devotions, and every one of them, I'm like, it popped a story into my mind from my own life, even the tilt-a-whirl.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the tilt-a-whirl. That is where I learned. Well, I tell people that writing the tilt-a-whirl, I learned my first lesson about joy, and that is that it is entirely possible for a human being to laugh and throw up at the same time. Joy, sorrow, right there, side by side. So there you have it.
Yeah. I remember we were on, it was a modified tilt-a-whirl because it went around and around like a tilt-a-whirl, but then it did this sort of thing with the whole platform.
Oh, yeah.
And I deal with vertigo now, but when I was a young teenager, I did not. However, my mother did. And
Yeah.
so
Oh,
the
no.
the ride finishes and she's like, wait, wait, don't leave me. I'm dizzy. I'm dizzy. And I'm the teenager that's not paying any attention, run off the thing. And I'm like, woo, that was I loved it. And she's like about to fall over. I felt so bad. But we laughed and laughed about that because she just looked like a drunk person trying to get off the ride.
Oh, man. Sorrow and joy. There you go.
Yeah. She forgave me. She laughed with me about it. She thought it was so funny that I just walked off and left her. It was terrible.
Oh my.
But oh goodness. And I love the cover of the book with that bird singing in the rain and just everything about the book. And the thing I loved too was all the scriptures that just remind us to be joyful.
Right.
And that was such an encouragement. Some of the devotions I hadn't read yet, I just read the scriptures and went through. And it was just like, wow, this is awesome. It's like a shot in the arm.
That's wonderful, because that was the intention to be. I call them joy shots. And I said, reading this book or listening to the podcast is like having joy shots with a friend. So there you go.
Well, how can we find God's joy in a situation that really is so filled with sorrow and discouragement? What advice would you give to us who are really having a hard time finding that joy?
I always want to acknowledge that there are situations that the situation itself, there is none, none. So this devotion and the things that I talk about in the podcast are not an effort to put a Band-Aid on a gaping wound
Mm,
and say, think happy thoughts and everything will be. No, no, it won't be. I always say that you have to look for the light,
mm,
look for a teeny bit of joy inside a big bad story. We had to do that. It was April of 2020, so COVID was rampant then. My father-in-law, who is 91, caught it, was in the hospital. We hadn't been able to see him for several weeks in his assisted living residence 4 miles away, because. And then he went to the hospital. We couldn't see him there either. And after a couple of days, he struggled to breathe.
mm.
And on the third day, he just said, I'm ready to go.
Wow.
And we were, of course, not ready to let him go. But I point in that horrible, horrible situation to a nurse named Karen. And she stood by his side. She used her own phone to FaceTime us
Wow.
as long as we wanted. She would hold, I don't know how long she held that phone. She decided one evening that she would bring in another computer and play hymns on the computer, not knowing that 12 years before his wife died, and every night he went to sleep listening to hymns on the
Wow.
radio. She told us, she said, I promise you, he will not be alone. And we watched time between his breaths got
Mm.
longer and longer. And then at one point, his chest just failed to rise. And my husband said, I think he's gone. And she checked and she nodded and she cried with us. In that nasty, awful situation, I mean, who could have guessed? I thought, how horrible is it to watch, especially for my husband, who's very close to his father, how awful to watch your loved one die on
Mm.
FaceTime.
Mm.
And yet, I thought, how wonderful it is to be able, in a situation like this, to be with him. It was how I described it as, it was the most terrible, beautiful thing I'd ever seen, to be with him as he took his last breath here and give him over into the
Yeah.
arms of God. So when you talk about some joy and sorrow in the same place, that was bad. And so we just had to look for that little piece of light, that little piece
Mm.
of joy within a story that had no good in it.
Yeah.
And that lady was wonderful,
Mm.
just awesome. So that is what I would say.
Yeah. My husband shares a story, uses it as an illustration. When we were in college, his parents lived way out in the country, and the closest house to their house was like a mile away. And one night, he said it was a cloudy night. You couldn't see stars, moon, or anything. There was just absolutely no light. It was pitch black everywhere. And he was looking out the window and he saw this little dot of light. And it took him a while. He's like trying to figure out what it is. But I mean, everything's just pitch dark. And there's this little dot of light. And it was the doorbell light on the house a mile away.
Oh, wow.
Or it may not be literally a mile, but it was a long ways. He said it just showed him that, first of all, in the darkest times, that little dot of joy, that little dot of light from God shines brighter than you can imagine because it's so contrasting to the darkness.
Mhm.
But the other thing that it showed him is you've got to look for that light, even in the darkest night. And I always think of that. I hold on to that because sometimes that's all the joy we can find is that little bitty dot. But it's there because God is always there. And sometimes it's just knowing, like when my mother passed away, she had been sick for a long time and we had prayed for her healing. And when we prayed for her healing, God took away her pain and told my mom and me that we would have 5 more years. And we both were like, couldn't we have 10 more? But she had 5 more years with us. And one of the things she was afraid of was drowning because she had almost drowned as a teenager and she was dealing with lung problems. So she said, the irony is I'm going to drown in my own lungs. And I just was like, oh, Lord, she's so terrified of that. Well, when she went peacefully. Her heart just stopped. And her husband was reading devotions to her and praying. And he thought she'd just fallen asleep while he was praying because she often did. And she was gone. And it was so awful because we were overseas and I kept saying, should I come home? And he kept saying, no, they're sending her home from the hospital tomorrow. There's no need for you to come home. And then she was gone. And so I was just crushed. My mom and I were so close. But then to find out that God took her so peacefully and answered that part of our prayers, that he gave us exactly the 5 years he'd promised. There were so many answered prayers and blessings in the midst of that pain and that sorrow. So God is just good. There's always something that he has provided, if it's just his presence to let us know we're not completely lost. We're not in the dark, completely lost. He's there. And that really is sometimes all we have, like you said. Well, it's kind of an abrupt shift here, but I have to ask you this other question. So I apologize for the emotional whiplash here, but
It's my life. So
why did you once rent a chimpanzee to come and play at your house for a couple of hours?
is that the most bizarre interview question anybody's ever given you? Just
Yes, it is.
Just tell me. Well, there's a point to it. So I'll tell you why. I'll tell you the story and tell you why. Years ago, my mom and I were at the Virginia State Fair, and we walked past this booth where you could get your picture taken with a chimp for $5. I begged my mom, begged and begged, please, mom, can we get our picture taken with the chimp? And she kept saying no. Keep in mind, this story's in the book. Keep in mind that I was 35 years old at the time. I was an adult. And one of the editors said, so can you let us know, like, were you 8 or 10? No, I was a grown woman with a child. My mom was about 70. But I said, why not? And she said, well, somebody might look at it someday and think it's a 3-generation photo. He was dead serious. I never forgot it. So we didn't do it. We did not do it. And I was so disappointed. Well, 20 years later, my mom was visiting from Indiana in Virginia, where I live. And we have a big family event. She was well into her 80s by that time. I thought, this is probably the last time my whole family will be here in Virginia to see me. So I was lying in bed one night thinking, what am I going to do with these people for days? And all of a sudden, I thought about that moment 20 years before. I thought, redemption or vengeance. I don't know. It was one or the other, maybe a little bit of both. I thought, I wonder if I could get a photographable chimpanzee, somewhere. So I put out feelers, and, networking is a lot easier now than it used to be. I found one local. I called the guy and said, Please don't think I'm crazy, but this is the story. He was delighted, and it was December, and he said, well, you don't want your mom to come out here in the cold, do you? I'll bring the chimp to your house. Oh, wow. I couldn't have been any happier. So we got the whole family together and got a photographer and a backdrop, and mom thought we were just taking family photos. I saw the handler and the chimp come up the steps. I said, Mom, put on your lipstick. I got a surprise for you. And he walked through the door and I said, do you remember? And she did. She was all about it this time. For 90 of the most joyful moments of our lives, we frolicked around with that chimp. We would lie down on the floor and she would roll over us like we were logs, and she would take grapes from our mouths and jump and leap, and she just loved people. So at the end of 90 minutes, sweet time, we all sat down for a family photo, and the chimp was in the front. I forget who was holding her, but I said, this is like one of those real old pictures you look at and say, I know everybody else in the picture, but who is this kid? Because the rest of them. But we did that. But the sweetest moment of the day was when my mom and I sat down for our picture with the chimpanzee. And I have that picture now on my dresser, and it reminds me of two things. Number one, that was a great moment. That was a great 90 minutes. Never forget it. Epic. But it also reminds me of moments in the day ahead that I don't want to miss.
Mm.
And a postscript to that story is my mom lived to be 99 and a half.
Wow.
And we were planning her celebration of life. We were with the pastor and the funeral director and all. And my brother and I were sitting with him, and he said, we need a picture for the little brochure that we hand out to everybody. And my brother kind of gave me the side eye. He said, I have an idea, but it might be inappropriate. That's our middle name. You would have to tell me what it was. So everybody who came in to the service saw that picture of my mom with a chimp, just her and the chimp. We got to tell the story at her service and laughed and laughed. And one more time, it was an example of joy and sorrow, same place. It is possible. So that chimpanzee taught me a lot. And I still get joy every morning from that picture.
Oh, I love that. Well, as we come to the end of our interview today, I want you to share one or two things that you have on the horizon for crazy joy. What are you planning to do?
Oh,
Because I know you keep a list, don't you?
I do keep a list. I'm still looking, and this is not the season for it, but I'm still looking to go dog sledding.
Oh
My
my
husband
goodness.
is on the hunt for a place. Virginia doesn't have enough snow for that. We may have to go to Alaska. Wouldn't that just be a shame if we had to do that? But that is one of the things I would love to do with my list. And I will say too, I don't call it a bucket list, I call it a life list,
Mm.
because a bucket list is a list of things you want to do before you die. A life list teaches you how to live. So I would love to somehow work my way into the prison, not as an inmate, but as to speak sometime. That is on the horizon. I will do that. I'm not sure how, but I would love to do that. So those are just two things. I think joy and adventure.
Mhm.
Sometimes people think, oh, if you want to do something adventurous or you want to keep this list, it has to be jump out of an airplane, not, and go skydiving. But there are lots of adventures that are emotional and spiritual and vocational and relational, and lots of things that maybe you haven't tried, but they're on your heart and on that list.
That's great. How can people reach you if they want to ask you to come share with them or they just want to check out your website? Where can they find you?
That's Jill at jillbaughan.com. And that's JILL, B as in boy, AUGHAN.com.
All
And you
right.
can email me and also go to the website. The website is a good representation of what you will get when you just a lot of fun. A lot of
Yes.
yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation. And I will have your link to your website in the show notes so people can just link right from there. We look forward to talking to you again in the future, but just thank you for sharing. I think you've encouraged everyone today.
I hope so. Thank you. It was a joy. Really.
Thank you for spending time with us today. If we sparked any questions or you want to share a comment, we would love to hear from you. I want to let you know about our discipleship coaching groups. In these groups, you get to ask your questions and share your concerns and get some answers and get some plans. If you have anything going on that you're facing in raising your children, disciplining them, discipling them, or anything with your homeschooling journey, we are happy to help answer those questions. You can join a once a month group or a twice monthly group that meets, and you can find that information on my website. The link will be in the show notes, and you can link right to that. We also have private coaching. If you need to make a lesson plan, like an IEP for your child, or are dealing with something really serious that you want to talk one-on-one about, we do have those as well. We're just here to serve you and help you. Just let us know how we can help you. We have a couple fun challenges that are free on my website as well. I'll have the links to those, and you can take part in some of the fun that we've got planned for you there. But most of all, we pray you feel empowered, equipped, and encouraged to walk by faith and to embrace everyday discipleship every day with the people in your life.